Philadelphia is steep in broadcast history. From the early pioneering days of broadcasting in the 1920s to today, Philadelphia has always been at the forefront. The Delaware Valley has been home to some of the best local programming in the country, starting with the early soap operas and children's shows to pioneering the best news formats in the country. Much of it all began right here. From radio announcers to television personalities, cameramen to directors, these were the broadcasters that burned up the airwaves. These were the pioneers of Philadelphia broadcasting.
Welcome to the Pioneers of Philadelphia Broadcasting. Our interview today is with Bill Vargus, known as Billy V. My name is Sue Serio, and I happen to be married to Bill Vargus. And so this is a very rare and exciting opportunity for the Pioneers of Philadelphia Broadcasting because he already interviewed me, and now I'm interviewing him. And I guess you'll find out about our career, Billy's career, and then how we kind of hooked up through this business. It happens sometimes, and at least as far as this taping is concerned, we're still together, and it's been wonderful. Welcome.
Thanks. And your part of it is a lot more interesting than mine.
Oh, so not at all. Not at all.
I'll be talking more about you than about myself.
I would say you have over 3 decades in radio and television because, like many of us, you started in radio and then moved into television. But what people may not realize is you're 6 foot 5 inches tall, 6 feet 5 inches tall. Mm. So everybody probably asks you, did you play basketball? Did you?
As a kid, every single day, all day, so you would think I'd have some skills. Well, I do, other than the fact that, I can't really shoot, and I don't have much of a handle, and I'm not a great defensive player or rebounder. But other than that, I'm really good.
So what you're saying is you didn't play ball in college or professionally?
I actually played college ball for about 1 minute. But the point was, I got cut from my high school team, and at that point, I said, because I was going to be the next, superstar basketball player in my mind, and then I said, well, I guess the best thing to do would be to talk about it for a living. So that's when I decided I was going to become a sportscaster. Okay. And when I went off to college, I did go out for the basketball team as a walk-on, and I actually made it. A walk-on, for those who are not that great with their sports knowledge, means I didn't get a college scholarship because I didn't play high school, and they had all the great college scholarship guys, and then I just go and try out, and I did make the team. But before the season started, I would go to practice and not go to class.
Ooh.
So then I was failing my classes in broadcasting, and so then I had to leave school before the season started.
All right, so let's back up a little bit because that was your first college, right? Texas Christian?
That was at Texas Christian University.
All right, let's back up even further. You were born in Chicago.
Correct.
But you grew up in Massachusetts.
Correct, outside of Boston.
Okay. And then you moved to Illinois.
Correct.
Remember all this because your mother was an academic and she was studying for her doctorate.
Yeah, and so then she got hired at Temple University, and that's how I ended up coming to Temple. After I dropped out of Texas Christian, by this time she had come to Philly to be a professor, actually the dean of a school of social work at Temple. And so I got to go to Temple free, so I came here.
Yeah, well, that was a pretty smart choice, I would say, at the time. Now, because your mother had pursued that academic path, did you ever feel like there was any pressure on you to do the same thing?
Oh, never.
Never?
I don't have her brains.
So you go to Temple and you decide to major in what?
In communications. And back then at WRTI, the students actually could go on the air and not only do news and sports, but also do the play-by-play of the basketball and football games. So I got a chance to do that, and that was great fun and a great learning experience. Now, then Temple got to be really big, especially after John Chaney came and made them like a basketball power. And then they got professional announcers, so the kids don't get to do the games anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, the same thing happened at my school, too. It was student-run when I was there, and now it isn't anymore. And that's a shame, really, for kids starting out in the business, so they don't get that hands-on experience anymore. But you did, and you graduated in 80.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. And then you pursued your career. So where'd you get started?
Well, actually, while I was working at WRTI, I got a chance to work at while I was in college, working at RTI. That led to me getting an opportunity to work at WIP Radio professionally
In Philadelphia.
in Philadelphia as like in my junior year.
And what were they? What was their format at the time?
At that time, they weren't all sports yet. They had an operation that doesn't exist in radio anymore. They had like a real newscast. Like they had 3 or 4 anchors throughout the day, and they had two people covering City Hall, and somebody out in Montgomery County, somebody in Delaware County. They had a whole news operation, and then I was working behind the scenes, making the phone calls and stuff, calling the fire department, calling the police, et cetera, to find out what was going on, and helping to put together this newscast.
But your ambition was to be on the air?
My ambition was definitely to be on the air, and so my last day of my last class at Temple, I get a phone call from WHAT Radio. A guy who I had worked with at WRTI, who's another Temple grad, told me they blew out their whole news staff, fired everybody except for him.
Gotta love broadcasting,
Yes, indeed. So he had recommended me, and so I came in and I auditioned and I got the job. So, fresh, as soon as I graduated college, I was in the professional world.
And then how long were you there at WHAT?
I was there about 8 months. But then the next opportunity came along.
Well, that's a pretty typical broadcasting thing, right?
Right.
To not be in one place very long.
Well, my first day on the job on WHAT, and I'm working with Mary Mason, who's a legend, Mornings with Mary, and Dolly Banks owns the station, because back then, unlike radio today, you had individual people who actually owned stations. They weren't owned by these giant conglomerates. And I had my first day on the air, like right away, and then I had to sit down with Dolly Banks and actually negotiate my contract. And she said, "Young man, I'm going to pay you $175 a week."
A week?
A week. And I was like, "Miss Banks, I got to have at least 200. I'm going to pay you $175 a week, young man, but I need at least 200. You see all these people out here walking past here on the street? Any one of them would love to be on the radio. I'm going to pay you $175 a week." And she was tough. And I held out for my 200, but I almost lost my job after one day on the air because I...
Wow. Well, good for you. You learned how to negotiate for yourself. So 8 months later, where did you go from there?
I got a call from WHYY Radio, and I was there about 8 months. They had a great news operation also.
Yeah.
And then where I really wanted to end up was at WDAS, and so I applied for a job there about 8 months after I got to HYY, and I ended up at WDAS Radio.
And what was your job there?
Well, I was a news anchor.
You were news.
Yeah.
But they played music too.
They were a music station,
Right.
on FM, and number one in the ratings for a while until Power 99 came into existence and knocked them off. But on the AM side, we did this. It was like a 2-hour newscast thing. So again, and I was a City Hall reporter, and so again, it was like a real news thing, unlike today where there's just, radio news is just almost non-existent.
Now, you've told me in the past, and very recently too, that whenever you got a job, you'd start immediately thinking about what your next job was going to be. So you'd be there for a certain amount of time and then start thinking about what was next. So
I really need to learn how to appreciate and live in the moment more, don't I?
Well, it kept you moving along in your career, that's for sure. So you're City Hall reporter at WDAS, and you stayed there for how long?
I stayed
a little
there,
longer?
I think 3 years.
Did you like it?
Because I loved it, yeah.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get into TV.
Then you wanted to get into TV. So is that what happened next, or did it take a while?
It took a while, and that's the thing, every day I'm sending out tapes and I'm getting these rejection letters, They don't say, like, "Oh, well, thank you for your application. After reviewing your tape, your skills are not commensurate with the opening we have at this time," which basically means you suck, leave us alone.
Yeah. Well, at least you got a letter. Sometimes they didn't even do that.
Well, I got plenty of letters, the rejection letters, and they piled up, and you just have to have that persistence, and stay at it.
So finally, you get a TV job, and where is it?
I got a job at Channel 3 as a writer.
So you were able to stay local?
I
Because
was.
many people have to go and move where the job is.
I went to the National Association of Black Journalists annual convention in Atlanta. and there was this guy from CNN, and he was looking at people's tapes, and he says, because I had just paid a guy, I sat down literally in a museum and paid a guy to shoot a tape because I didn't have a tape, right?
Oh,
I'm a
right.
radio
Yeah,
guy.
you need it. You need it.
So it wasn't the most professional thing, but I showed him my tape and he said, "Oh, you're really good. I'm going to have you working at CNN before you know it, this and that," right?
Right.
And then months go by and I don't hear anything, and I call up CNN, and I somehow got through to the news director, because most of the time you call these TV stations and you absolutely can't get to talk to anybody important. And he said, "Well, who are you?" And I said, "Well, Jay Suber said that he was going to get me a job. He looked at my tape." And the guy was like, "Well, Jay Suber, who's he? He's a nobody. He can't get you any job, blah, 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 blah." Right? We're CNN. If you want to start out, you start out in a local market. You don't come here. We're a network. And I was like, "Okay, sorry," whatever. And I get, and then Jay Suber, who later did become like vice president of news for CNN or something years later, right? He calls me up and he says, "Oh, I'm really sorry, Bill. I couldn't get you in, but there's a job. I got a friend who's the assistant news director at Channel 3, and they're looking for a writer." So I go over there and I took a writing test and ended up as a writer at Channel 3.
And you worked with a lot of broadcasting legends while you were there, Pat Cherokee and people like that?
I worked with Pat Cherokee, who's a broadcasting legend.
Yes.
The rest of the people, no.
Okay.
Channel 3 was like a revolving door back then. You know, you have a different anchor every week or every other week.
What time period was this? 1980 something?
This was 85.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mid 80s.
Howard Eskin was there. He was the sports anchor.
Okay.
Which is why I didn't get involved in the sports department. I stayed in the news side.
Okay. So, but you're still behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You're not on the air
Right.
at Channel 3. So you're looking for an opportunity. Now that you've got some TV writing experience, now you're looking for that on-air opportunity, right?
Yeah, there were a lot of people at Channel 3 who were very cutthroat, but there were also the people who worked behind the scenes, the camera people and everybody. They were great people. Mm-hmm. So I established good relationships. So one day, the director, a couple of camera people, the Chiron guy, they all on their lunch break skipped lunch and let me go down in the studio and do a real looking newscast.
Oh, you could like read the prompter.
I could read the prompter, the
and
graphics came up with my name and everything, and they helped me make a
nice.
really nice tape. So that was really something that I always owe those people, that they did that. And then I sent it out, and then I ended up getting a job at Channel 12 here in Philly.
WHYY.
Except it was in the Wilmington
Right,
branch
because at that
of
time,
Channel 12.
and still today, it's licensed to both cities, Philadelphia and Wilmington, Delaware. Mm-hmm. So because of that licensing arrangement, a certain amount of programming has to be produced out of Wilmington,
right.
which is why they had a newscast
right.
in Wilmington, Delaware.
And so I started actually as a news reporter.
Okay.
But the general manager who hired me had some intention of having me do sports, because here's how it was back then. A news guy went out, he did a package, then he came back, then he would anchor sports, reading up from the prompter from something that somebody else had written.
Wow. This is low
and
budget.
The weather person did the same thing. She was a news reporter, went out, covered a package, then came back, did the weather.
Right. And that's what you do when you have a low budget television station, right?
Right.
But it got you the sports experience you needed.
And then when I talked to the general manager and said, "Look, I really want to do the sports thing," and he said, "Okay." And then I go in and I started working on sports from the beginning, from the time I walked in the door, instead of going to a news package. And the news director was like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm working on my sports cast." And she said, "You think you're just going to sit around and do nothing but sports all day? What is wrong with you?" So I had to go talk to the general manager, and he talked to her. And from that point on, instead of having to go out and do a news package and come back and do sports, and that somebody else had written using day-old information, I was actually able to go out and start doing sports reporting and
really
interviews
covering
myself.
the teams.
Yes.
Now you get credentialed, and you can go into the Phillies locker room, the Eagles locker room, and place the Sixers.
Yeah.
How'd that feel?
Well, that was a lot of fun, but I mean, I was a journalist. I wasn't like wide-eyed that I could go into the Eagles locker room or anything, but it was, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was great to run around and cover sports all day.
And then you came back, and then you would talk about it on TV.
Yeah.
And then there came a day when there was an opportunity for a new weather person to come onto TV 12.
Trying to think of who that was.
So then here you are, a sports anchor at WHYY, and along comes a day when they have an opening for a new person to do weather. And you get an opportunity to look at a video of an audition for the weather, and it was me.
Oh, okay. I was trying to think of who that was you were talking about. Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah, and I said, she's okay. Who else you got? And the news director, Nancy Karabjanian, said, well, she's pretty much the only one we're really considering. So I said, oh, well, okay.
Right, so...
But then I worked with you, and you were incredible.
Well, we did have a good time working together, but I want to tell, of course, the not so happy part of the story, because I think it's an important part of being in broadcasting that you have to learn how to take your lumps too. So everything was going along great, and then you get an opportunity while you're working at WHYY to also work at Channel 10 in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, that dream moment that you're sitting at your desk and you get a phone call, and it's, hey, Bill, my name is Paul Gluck. I'm the news director at Channel 10. I've seen your work. Would you be interested in possibly coming to work for us as a weekend fill-in? And that was a great opportunity. And
so you did weekdays at Channel 12
Yeah.
and weekends at Channel 10. You have two jobs.
I did every other weekend at Channel 10
Okay.
because if I did every weekend, they would have had to pay me some benefits or something.
Oh, right. So that's what kept you part-time. But it was a
Right.
great opportunity. And and then what happened?
Well, Paul Gluck, they let him go, and they let the general manager go, and they replaced them. And those people who came in, of course, I think they wanted their own people.
Sure.
At that point, I was working pretty much every weekend or something like that. So what they did was, it's still a part-time gig, so they decided, rather than have two different part-time people, because they had me every other weekend and they had Jeff Ash, who's now a radio guy, every other weekend, so that they wouldn't have to pay either one of us benefits. So they just decided what we're going to do instead of this is just create another full-time position. And I was hoping that I would get that position, but when they told me, make a tape and submit it to us for the job, and I'm like, I'm on your air every other weekend. You want me to make a tape? But I did, and then Gail Schister it was different then. She was a reporter in the paper who covered TV and radio, and she was always writing stuff, and she wrote that I was probably going to get the job, and then I didn't. They hired a guy from Georgia. Check this out. His name is Dave Culbreth, and he got the job, and I didn't. So then, 2 days later, I walk into my job at Channel 12, and the general manager calls me in, and he says, Bill, we have this budget crisis, and we read in the paper that you were going to get the job at Channel 10 full time, so we figured this would be a perfect time for us to eliminate sports from our budget. So I went from having the two jobs, Channel 12 and Channel 10, to having no jobs in the space of about 2 or 3 days.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is life in broadcasting. But you didn't give up. And eventually, you got back on the radio.
Yeah, I think what happened was, I took up acting.
Right.
I was living in New York City.
You thought this would be a good opportunity because that was always a dream of yours too,
Yeah.
to be an actor.
And I had this job working in law firms on the side, like from 2 in the morning till 8 a.m. or something, and it was terrible. And I wrote a letter to the guy who had been the assistant news director at Channel 3 when I worked there. He was now the news director at Channel 9 in New York. And I wrote him a letter. I said, look, I need to get back into television, whatever you got, a writing position, anything. you know, I need to get back into TV. And he called me up and he said, I happen to be looking for a weekend sports anchor. I said, okay. So actually I was doing that for a while.
Okay, and now just to put a little personal in it, this is when we were dating. We weren't dating when we worked together at TV 12.
Right.
But by this time we were starting to see each other, and so it became quite an adventure with like me losing a radio job, and then we went through this period of time when one of us always had a job, but not both at the same time. It was kind of crazy,
I think
wasn't
there
it?
was like 2 years there where either one or the other of us was always unemployed.
Yeah, it was crazy. But
You were working at Magic.
yeah,
And then they let you go so they could hire Delilah.
right.
Before she was a national
Then I get a Kiss
syndicated
100,
show.
and then with the other guy from Magic that they fired, and we become a morning team. We last 6 months, and they fire everybody to change the format.
Mm-hmm.
It was just crazy. So then at this point, I guess we're in the early '90s, and you're on the radio, Q102 in
Yeah.
Philadelphia.
Yeah. They had the audacity to call me up and offer me a job while I was working at Channel 9 in New York. And at that time, Channel 9 was a super station. It could be seen all over the East Coast.
That's right.
Because cable was a lot different then.
Yeah.
And I ended up taking that job because they decided to replace me at Channel 9 with a woman. So I actually went from anchoring my last show on Channel 9 at 11 o'clock and then starting at Q102 here in Philly, like at 6 a.m. the next morning.
Right. So you did the news for their morning show there. I still remember it was the Q Buzz.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I get an opportunity to work full-time in television in Buffalo.
Right.
And I take it. But we're engaged at this point. So now you start looking for a job in Buffalo, because I'm going to be in Buffalo for 3 years. I'm signing a contract, and we're about to get married.
And I thought it would be easy because I worked in Philly, I worked in New York,
Right.
and they wouldn't even take my calls, most of the stations in Buffalo. They were number 40 market.
But then what happened?
Then I get a call from the station manager at the station that you're working at.
Right, WIVB.
And he says their sports guy, who's a legend, who's been there for as long as there's been TV, is going to semi-retire, and maybe I should audition for the job. And they flew me out there.
Yeah.
For the audition, and they decided it'd be a good idea maybe to have you on the set with me to introduce me and to do the little crosstalk, right?
Yeah.
And so we're doing the audition, and you toss to me, and then I banter with you a little bit, then I turn to the camera and I'm into da 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 da. And then all of a sudden the news director comes in and interrupts me. Sorry, Bill, we had a technical problem. We got to start again. And I said, okay. And then you lean over to me and you said, well, I think you're being too up. I think you got to pull it back a little bit. So we redo the audition, and I'm a little more laid back this time. And of course, what happened? They wanted up. They wanted up tempo. They're like, oh, you were kind of laid back on that tape, because the station manager, who was really the guy doing the hiring, he wasn't there during the audition. He's like, I don't know.
So I almost messed up that opportunity.
Almost killed it for both of us.
So karma, I guess. I don't know.
But they hired me anyway.
They hired you anyway, and we both worked at the same television station. But you worked nights and I worked mornings, and that
Right.
became kind of our thing for a while. So we stayed there for 3 years. We got married. We had a baby.
Yeah.
And then you get an opportunity in Philadelphia
Right.
to do weekends at Channel 29.
Fox 29, which I almost didn't take. In fact, they wanted to flyer me out, and I was like, no, because when I got to Buffalo, it was my first chance really to be the main sports anchor. That
Right.
station became #1 in the ratings because I was doing all kind of crazy stuff, and my Q rating was
Personality.
off the charts. Thank you. And so when the Fox 29 offered me a weekend gig, I was like, no, I'm not going back to being a weekend guy.
But it was a weekend gig in a big market.
Even still, I wasn't going to take it. But since it was Philly and I was coming back here to visit family, I mean, we this is home for us.
Right,
at
and
this
we had
point.
a child by then, and we wanted our child to grow up near family.
Yeah,
And
so
mine was in Baltimore, yours was here.
since we were coming back to visit
Yeah.
anyway, I said, well, I'll go over to Fox 29 and I'll talk to John Musoni, the news director, anyway, since I'm going to be here anyway. And, it was like a recruiting visit. He really, really made me feel like I would have a great opportunity here. So, and of course, he knew you because you had been working at Channel 29
It was freelance, yeah.
freelance prior to going to Buffalo.
Right.
So
We
took the job.
pack up our little baby and we come back to Philadelphia, and you're working weekends, and then I got an opportunity. Long story
Well, I'm
short.
anchoring weekends and reporting during the week.
Right,
Yeah.
right, and so once again, I get a job on the morning show, and you're doing weekends and nights. So once again, we're back where we were. But it was a rare. I remember feeling at the time it was so rare and special. We had 2 times where we were, well, really 3, where we both worked at the same television station. The one where we met, and then Buffalo, and then Philadelphia, and.
Yeah, but you outlasted me. I lasted
Well-
12 years, and you've lasted 20.
Yeah, that recession hit, and they were firing people right, left, and sideways at Fox 29.
Right.
It was a very scary time
Yeah.
when that recession hit, and not a lot of people didn't survive.
But you did. You know why? You're recession-proof.
This interview isn't about me, and I want to mention too before we have to wrap it up that. During this time, you did have acting opportunities. You did act off Broadway in New York. And then once we moved back here to Philadelphia and we moved to Media, Pennsylvania, in Delaware County, just outside of Philadelphia, you had the opportunity to star in a show at the Media Theater, Dr. Dolittle.
Well, like most everything else, I owe that to you, too. Because first, they asked us to do love letters together.
Yes.
And we did love letters.
And you were so outstanding that they gave you your own show. So that was great, and it gave you like a new performing life after television, which was awesome.
Yeah, because it's singing, it's musical theater,
Yeah,
it's singing, and I
yeah.
could take singing lessons, and it was a lot of fun. But being a full-time actor, especially a stage actor, is a lot of fun and a nice way to starve.
Yeah.
So,
So now you've proved that there is life after television because you're doing something completely different that you, well, from my observation, seem to be enjoying.
oh, I'm doing real estate investing, so
Yeah.
it's look, running your own business is a lot of fun because, well, it's not fun, it's work, but it's nice because you get rewards for however hard you work. You determine how successful you're going to be. And you're not working for anybody else. And even
Not
in
at the
broadcasting,
whim of news directors
Yeah.
and program directors.
as you
and-
know, you can be a star on the air and still get treated like dirt behind the scenes. So,
Yeah.
that's the thing.
But people still recognize you from television, and
That's because they see me with you.
no, you established your own personality. You were on this market for 12 years in Philadelphia, full time, and I think people still tell me that they wish you were back on TV. But I'm glad you're happy doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And thanks for this great interview. It was fun.
It was fun.
Yeah, to work together again.
Yeah, I like old times.
All right. For the broadcast pioneers of Philadelphia, I'm Sue Serio. Thanks so much for watching.